Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Mr. Pad, Paramahansa, Padurikacharya, Astotra, Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Vishnupad, Paramahansa, Padurikacharya, Astotra, Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On the 5th day of April 2021 in SanDiego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are beginning chapter 10, entitled The Opulence of the Absolute, page 419. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramang vachaha yatte aham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamyaya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamya. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Bhuya eva mahabaho shinu me paramam vachaha yatteham priyamanaya vakshyami hitakamya. Okay, I'll read the word by words. Shri Bhagavan Vacha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, said, Bhuyaha, again, eva, certainly, mahabaho, almighty armed, shinu, just hear, me, my, paramang, supreme, vachaha, instruction. Yet that which, te, to you, aham, I, priyamanaya, thinking you dear to me, vakshyami, say, hitakamyaya, for your benefit. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, Listen again, Almighty Armed Arjun, because you are my dear friend, for your benefit I shall speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I have already explained. Purport. The word Bhagavan is explained thus by Parashara Muni. One who is full in 6 opulences, who has full strength, full fame, wealth, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation, is Bhagavan, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While Krishna was present on this earth, he displayed all 6 opulences. Therefore, great sages like Parashara Muni have all accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now Krishna is instructing Arjuna in more confidential knowledge of his opulences and his work. Previously, beginning with the 7th chapter, the Lord has already explained his different energies and how they are acting. Now in this chapter he explains his specific opulences to Arjuna. In the previous chapter he has clearly explained his different energies to establish devotion in firm conviction. Again, in this chapter, he tells Arjuna about his manifestations and various opulences. The more one hears about the Supreme God, the more one becomes fixed in devotional service. One should always hear about the Lord in the association of devotees. That will enhance one's devotional service. Discourses in the society of devotees can take place only among those who are really anxious to be in Krishna consciousness. Others cannot take part in such discourses. The Lord clearly tells Arjuna that because Arjuna is very dear to him, for his benefit, such discourses are taking place. Om jnana timarandasya Gyanandana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So, here this chapter is entitled The Opulence of the Absolute, and perhaps the highlight of the chapter, you could say, are these four essential verses that we'll read in 10, 8, 9, 10, and 11, where Krishna will declare that he is that absolute truth who is being sought after by the students of the Vedanta Sutra, Tato Brahma Jigyasa, the source of everything. And he in those four verses, he covers in sutra form Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. So we'll get to that in a few verses, probably tomorrow or next day. But here Krishna is saying, I'm again describing to you. So he's dealing with subject matters he's dealt before, but in more detail and slightly different perspective. As Prabhupada refers to the 7th chapter, where Krishna began describing his different energies, and how everything that exists is nothing but a combination of the external and internal energies of Krishna. And he also described there how those who worship gods, the demigods, really have had their knowledge stolen by material desire, and their fruits are ultimately temporary, and so they're not very intelligent. And there's many important instructions in that 7th chapter. So, as Prabhupada mentions in this purport, we should be eager to hear about Krishna from all different perspectives. His specific energies, how they're manifesting here, what's going on in the spiritual world, what is our relationship, why are we in this world suffering, what's the source of that, and how can we get back to the spiritual world, how can we solve the problems of life. And really one can get that knowledge only in the association of devotees. Now we should never forget that even if you're sitting alone on a mountain or maybe in a train somewhere surrounded by non-devotees, if you're absorbed in reading Prabhupada's books, you have the association of the greatest devotee of modern times. Reading Srila Prabhupada's books in the right attitude, especially with receptivity and interest and devotion, is the greatest boon you can have, because it's counteracting all of the ignorance and the illusion that has been infecting us since time immemorial. So that's why not only distributing the books, but hearing them, understanding them, discussing them threadbare is so important. Now, one point Krishna makes here, which he makes earlier in the 4th chapter, and this word, yateham priyamanaya. Because you're dear to me, I'm explaining to you all of these things. Remember back in the 4th chapter where Krishna described how he spoke this knowledge to the sun god? It's very interesting there, because at the end of the 3rd chapter, there's this whole discourse on lust. Remember? Arjuna asked the question, what is it that forces us to do things that we know are bad for us? Kama esha, krodha esha, rajoguna samudbhava. Krishna answers. Somehow that section of the Gita always very intrigues me. And then he describes how that kama, that lust, it covers our knowledge. It covers the knowledge of the original knowledge of the living entity. Originally we are Satchidananda. We're full of knowledge, we're eternal, full of bliss. But because of our association with the modes of nature since time immemorial, that knowledge has been lost or buried. We don't have access to it. And the way it happens is through material desire, kama. And Prabhupada very fascinatingly describes in that section how kama is nothing but the original prema that has been distorted or perverted by contact with the material energy. That original desire to love Krishna exclusively has been turned into varieties of attraction for this material world in all different kinds of species and situations. And that kama, avatam jnanametena jnanino nityavaidina, that's eternal enemy of the conditioned soul known as material desire or lust, it covers the original knowledge of the knower. That's what this means. And that kama, that material desire, infects the senses, the mind, and the intelligence. In this way, it keeps us bound since time immemorial. So how do we break free of that? Well, Krishna at the end of that section, he says, Evam buddhe padam buddhvastam stapyatmanam atmanam jahi shaktam mahabhav kama rupam darasadam. That knowing oneself knowing that you are transcendental not only to the senses but the mind and the intelligence, conquer this enemy known as lust by controlling the lower self by the higher self. Now that's the end of the chapter. The beginning of the next chapter, he says, Imam vivastade yogam proktavanaham avviyam. Vivasvamanavipahamanikvakavevavi. I spoke this yoga, vivastade yogam, a science of yoga, to the sun god millions of years ago, who then spoke it to the Manu, his son, Vivastha Manu, and then gave it to Ikshvaka, who's come down to human society. Well, where's the yoga? In other words, he ends with this thing, knowing oneself to be transcendental. So there's a science of yoga in there. How you can get the spiritual strength to control the lower self by the higher self. And that, of course, is the science of bhakti. But it's interesting that he begins that chapter with this. And then, this this science has come down, but due to the powerful force of long time, it's become lost in human society. So Krishna wants to renew it again. Now, why has he chose Arjuna? What is that? Sahivaya Maya Teja Yoga Prokta Puratana Bhaktosi Me Sakacheti Rahasam Yetamuttanam. I want to renew this again in society, this very same yoga, and I've chosen you because you're very dear to me, you're my devotee. So the idea is that only the devotees are really eligible to receive this knowledge. Even if others become exposed to it, they can't understand it. I remember back in 1981 or 82, I was working in Philadelphia and on the Back to Guided magazine, and Jayawada Swami was there, and he was the main editor of BTG, but most of his attention was on going through the Bhagavad Gita and seeing if there were things that needed to be adjusted. So he had purchased 1 or 2 academic Bhagavad Gitas, just to get a further perspective on the Bhagavad Gita. And I looked into one of them, and it was one of these books that's printed. There's only like a few hundred printed because it's for some course in school, academic printing, and the book can cost $100, one book. I have a book like that of this Chaitanya Charitamrita translation. It costs $100, the whole CC in one volume. No Bengali or anything, just English translation. So anyway, and I looked into it, and there was like one verse per page and maybe a little commentary, but it was all like analyzing the Sanskrit, And there was no clue there. He had really no clue about what the whole import of the Bhagavad Gita was. It's a book of instructions. It's a normative book, means that it's meant to change your behavior, As I think it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj who asked some professor who said, yeah, I've read the Bhagavad Gita. Well, then what are you going to do? And he had no idea what he was talking about. He didn't think that the Gita is meant to change the course of your life for the better. It's auspicious. So Prabhupada gave this Bhagavad Gita as it is for that reason. And Krishna spoke it for that reason. Not only for Arjuna, but for us. He says in that very 4th chapter, Yada yada hi dharma se glana bhavati bharata, when the dharma becomes ascendant in this world, and adharma is ascendant, and dharma is dharma se glani, there's so much discrepancies. At that time I come again to annihilate the miscreants, protect the devotees, and re-establish dharma. How does he do that? By speaking the Gita, by installing great kings like Yudhishthira on the throne, and by always having his representative, some representative on the earth, who is spreading the science. So we are trying to follow the mission that Krishna is giving down here in this 10th chapter. And he will again eventually get to the point where he goes through a whole list of ways in which we can see Krishna in this world. When you read this chapter, then you can go see the ocean. And that's one of the things Krishna says he is, right? Because the ocean is so vast and powerful, that it can remind you of the great power of Krishna. Prabhupada refers, as he does elsewhere in this Bhagavad Gita, to the meaning of Bhagavan, given by Parashara Muni. Aishwaryasya samagrasya viryasya yashashakshya jnana vairagyaschaiva Shannam bhagi itingana. This is the definition of Bhagavan. one who has complete Aishwarya. Now I like to point out the word Aishwarya, which means wealth, is related to Ishvara. If you have a lot of wealth, then you have a lot of control, right? You can buy so many politicians, right? So that's the way it works. So Krishna has all the wealth. Everything belongs to him. Ishavasya sarvam. He's in control of everything. When we claim something for ourselves, we're thieves. We're thieves. And thieves can never be happy. Because they think, oh, they're coming to get me. You know. So the idea is we have a right to our quota. We have enough to support ourselves, you know. And Krishna's supplying, but nothing else. So everything has to be used in Krishna's service, and that's the definition of real vairagya. That's another opulence of Krishna. Now vairagya probably translates as renunciation, which is of course correct, but it's really an internal renunciation, meaning a lack of material desire, detachment, dispassion is a word in almost exactly translated vairagya. Because our whole problem is we are full of raga for things in this world, and it acts like knots and ropes within our heart, and again and again it keeps us coming back, and we're making new desires as we try to satisfy the old desires. Unless we get a process by which we can purify our desires, there's no possibility of breaking free of the round of birth and death. And impersonal realization doesn't do that. That's the last snare of Maya, the desire to be God. And there's so many instances of personal yogis who are not, the Sobari Muni, Vishwamitra Muni, who may perform severe austerities to control those senses and mind, but one little exposure, and they'll become fall down again. And so we need to purify the desires, not to try to repress them. What will repression accomplish? Krishna says. So Krishna is giving us so many ways that when we see something, very impressive, very beautiful, very powerful in this world, we can say, "Oh, this is a spark of Krishna's splendor." I remember an incident back in L.A. This was in probably '75, shortly after I arrived there. Those of you who have been to the temple, have you been to the temple, Watsika? Have you ever? So that big highway there, Venice Boulevard, used to be a 4-lane thing, not the 6 lanes they have now. And there was a big median. But when I came there, they were already widening it. It was a years-long project. Maybe it was early '76 when it finally happened. So there were these bulldozers going up the median and making the extra, it was a whole construction project. What they didn't know, or they forgot, was that if you look in L.A., there's some of these hills behind the temple that go back, and there's actually oil there. And it turned out there was a little refinery up there, and they were pumping gasoline down to the port for export. So there's a pipe under that median, full of gasoline. So this guy is working his bulldozer. He hits that pipe. It's this huge explosion. The poor guy died on the he was the only one who died. But it was like, wow, this is like a Holocaust. They called it that in the papers. And suddenly, it couldn't have been like more than a block from the temple. A big column of fire, it's being fed by this gasoline under pressure. And we were worried about devotees, because devotees lived all over. Some lived across the street. Was anyone hurt? Like that. So there was all of this panic, and there was a big effort to get the books out of the book room and the deity clothes, which are worth thousands and thousands of dollars out of the, you imagine Rukmini Dwarkadish, they had wonderful, to this day, of course. So everyone's running around, like anything. Then we heard a rumor, that gasoline is going down into the sewers and it's going to explode the whole block, Oh my God, So, of course, it didn't. The deities were moved from the temple. It was a whole thing. So eventually, of course, things got back to normal. The deities came back, and for a week, the devotees were giving classes, and they were referring to that experience. And how do you see that? In other words, there were crowds gathering to watch the whole thing. It's a spectacle. But as devotees, the way we're meant to see that is as the display of Krishna's amazing energy, like the universal form. Suddenly, there's a display of power that is way beyond anything. They couldn't control it right away. It took hours to get that thing under control. But we see that all the time with natural disturbances. This COVID thing can be seen as that. This is a reaction of nature for sinful reaction to something. They couldn't, we really don't have it under control. It's beyond human ability to control. And this is, devotees are meant to see the world through the eyes of Shastra. And one of the ways is to read this 10th chapter and see, when we see the ocean, think, oh, that's, power, a display of Krishna's energy, of his wonderful energy and so forth. But before we get to that, we're going to get to these 4 key verses, which are very important to understand, and hopefully we can do that soon. Okay, any discussion on this first verse?
Yes.
Sure. Hare Krishna. You too. I'm sorry, I don't recognize it because of the mask. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm always intrigued by.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Can you hear?
No. It's too low.
Very faint. The word Bhagavan, the 6 opulences, 5 are positive, 1 is negative.
The renunciation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it kind of seems like the oddball. Seems like, and people often wonder.
Well, that's why I say, when you think what it actually means, vairagya. Vairagya is something that you want. In other words, the idea is that Krishna is full in himself. He's completely self-satisfied. This is what this means. The description of this vairagya is there in his relation to the queens. It's described like that. That even though they were the most beautiful ladies in the universe, and he had all of these, he was leading a perfect householder life, and they thought he was henpecked, like that. Factually, it says right in the Bhagavatam, actually, he was full in himself, and he wasn't, infatuated with any of them. So, think about it. That this is something that devotees want to have, vairagya. Just like it says in way back in the 2nd chapter, there's those 2 verses, very graphic verses, dhyayato vishayan panksa sangha. And this is, who reading that Bhagavad Gita with any intelligence could not relate to those 2 verses? Yeah, I've experienced that, getting, absorbed in the material energy and getting attracted and then getting, losing my intelligence. And so then at the end of that, there's a verse that describes how one can avoid this disaster of losing one's intelligence and being buried under the mode of passion. Raga dveshiva muktaistu vishayanindriyaischadam atmavarshe vidhayama prasadam adhigacchati. This word raga is there as in vairagya. So it says there that one who practices the regular principles of freedom, this wonderful phrase, which is like all of the do's and don'ts of bhakti yoga, basically. Then, if one is doing it properly, even when the senses are moving amongst the objects of the senses, there's no raga, no dvesha, which is just the opposite. In other words, it's a strength to be able to, who is stronger? Haridas Thakur or Vishwamitra Muni? Haridas Thakur was just chanting Hare Krishna, and he was totally detached. He could have just walked away, but to show mercy on this positive deliverer, he stayed for 3 days. You know all the story, So he wasn't attracted, and she was purified, because he had complete vairagya, because he's completely absorbed in Krishna. His raga was in serving Krishna in absorption. So that vairagya is also a positive quality. Renunciation, tyaga, is kind of a negative thing. And that's the last, it's interesting, the last chapter is called the Perfection of Renunciation, but it's all about tyaga at the beginning, that one should, give up, one should not give up yagya, dana, and tapa, thinking that they're illusion. That's illusory tyaga. So we practice tyaga to some degree, the 4 regulatives of tyaga, 4 little principles, But mostly, we're into yukta vairagya, using things that would normally be used for sense gratification in Krishna service. That's the definition,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Raga,
Means none. Not. Yeah. No attack, no attraction.
And so it's based on Atmarama, on being satisfied.
Exactly. Exactly.
What's the difference between Atmarama and Santushta? Because are there synonyms or are they slightly different?
They're very close, you know. Atmarama generally means, satisfied within oneself. Like, Shukadeva Goswami was an Atmarama Simone.
Relates to spiritual satisfaction.
Yes, Santushta. Being full, it's often used in relation to devotees being fully satisfied by the nectar of Krishna consciousness, with others. What does it say? Machchitamagata pranabodhi and paraswaram kate indastamam nityam tushyanti chadamandi. That word tushyanti is the verb for tushta. Means satisfaction from Krishna kata. That's the thing. But this vairagya was... another question? We have a Zoom.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol,
I have one question, thank you. You said, Prabhu, vairagya, internal and external, there are different two vairagyas?
I'm sorry, internal and external what?
Vairagya, detachment, the vairagyas are different or it's only internal?
No, vairagya is an internal state, actually. It means dispassion, which is a state of the heart. Whereas tyaga is something you can see, literally giving up, walking away from the situation. Tyaga, taking sannyas. But the whole vairagya might not be complete totally. You take sannyas and you're still struggling, so you have to go far away, go to the forest or something, But you can have vairagya right in the middle of the most, in family life. The great devotees, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they were vairagis, but they were still in family life. You see, they weren't literally tyagis. They didn't, didn't go to the forest. Not necessary. You understand what I'm saying? More?
Yes, Prabhu. So you are saying that internally we do tyaga, but we are living in like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he lived in a family life, but internally he had tyaga, right?
He had vairagya. Vairagya. Raga dvesha vimuktais tu vishayan in the yaisadan. The idea is raga dvesha, being liberated, free from attachment and abhorrence. There's a flip side to raga. You see what I'm saying? Raga and dvesha. Vimukta, liberated from. Even when amongst the objects of the senses. I think of Prabhupada when he came to New York. I used to live in New York and I knew it pretty well, especially at that time. Times Square, Broadway. It was like, it was all kinds of nasty attractions you had. Prabhupada was walking there with his book looking for a bookstore to try to sell some books. He wasn't in the least attracted. I had my kind of homely example I gave. Some of you have heard this already. Back in early 80s, I lived in Philadelphia working at BTG. We'd go on Harinam downtown. And they had a big square that was blocked off to traffic. And it was just pedestrians and there were all kinds of shops around, And one of them was a bakery. I don't know if all they made was cookies, but anyway, it was like chocolate chip cookies, You walk in there and you'd smell them, fresh baking chocolate chip cookies, So we're chanting away, And of course you couldn't help smelling that. But immediately there's this reaction in the mind. Yeah, but they're not offered. And who knows what's in them, So the attraction isn't there. But the people who are just kind of moseying around trying to enjoy, maybe, I think maybe we should get some cookies. The idea is to plant, and it works, So that by intelligence, by the intelligence and of course the chanting of the holy name, you can remain detached. Or the other example, New Year's Eve, traditionally, of course, last New Year's Eve we couldn't do anything. We have a big Harinam downtown. And there's all kinds of people come to the gas lamp who otherwise don't come to SanDiego. I mean, there's always a nightlife every Friday night. But on New Year's Eve, there's like crowds of people on the sidewalk, So we're going along, this is a few years ago, and I'm leading the party and I'm in front. And right in front of us were these bunch of, how can I put it, scantily, clad ladies, And I was just... I almost laughed, We're chanting like anything. And it's like, you don't want to get too close, but it's not like there's any attraction. It's just cut off. It's just like you're absorbed in the holy name. And really there's a sort of a sense of sorrow for these poor living entities who feel they have to, do this in order to make money or whatever they're doing. And so, plus all the restaurants, none of that is attractive. I mean, every devotee who goes on Harinam in some downtown has an experience like that. When you get absorbed in chanting, especially in congregation with the big kirtan, you're in kind of a bubble there, and you're experiencing some joy, bliss, whatever you want to call it, in chanting the holy name. And that cuts off the ability of Maya to attract you, at least at that point, until you get into Maya. But that shows the power of chanting. And that's really what protects the devotee. The more he keeps, chanting nicely and remembering Krishna and staying with the service, then Maya can't get to you.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Okay, let's go on. Text 2. Name vidu suragana pabhavang namaharshayaha ahamadihi devanam maharshinam cha sarvashaha. Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origins or opulences, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and sages. Purport. As stated in the Brahma Samhita, Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord. No one is greater than Him. He is the cause of all causes. Here it is also stated that by the Lord personally that He is the cause of all the demigods and sages. Even the demigods and great sages cannot understand Krishna. They can understand neither His name nor His personality. So what is the position of the so-called scholars of this tiny planet? No one can understand why this Supreme God comes to earth as an ordinary human being and executes such wonderful, uncommon activities. One should know, then, that scholarship is not the qualification necessary to understand Krishna. Even the demigods and the great sages have tried to understand Krishna by their mental speculation, and they have failed to do so. In the Srimad Bhagavatam also, it is clearly said that even the great demigods are not able to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They can speculate to the limits of their imperfect senses and can reach the opposite conclusion of impersonalism, of something not manifested by the three qualities of material nature, or they can imagine something by mental speculation, but it is not possible to understand Krishna by such foolish speculation. Here the Lord indirectly says that if anyone wants to know the absolute truth, here I am present as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I am the Supreme. One should know this. Although one cannot understand the inconceivable Lord who is personally present, He nonetheless exists. We can actually understand Krishna, who is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, simply by studying His words in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. The conception of God as some ruling power, or as the impersonal Brahman, can be reached by persons who are in the inferior energy of the Lord. But the personality of Godhead cannot be conceived unless one is in the transcendental position. Because most men cannot understand Krishna in His actual situation, out of His causeless mercy He descends to show favor to such speculators. Yet despite the Supreme Lord's uncommon activities, these speculators, due to contamination in the material energy, still think that the impersonal Brahman is the Supreme. Only the devotees who are fully surrendered unto the Supreme Lord can understand by the grace of the Supreme Personality that He is Krishna. The devotees of the Lord do not bother about the impersonal Brahman conception of God. Their faith and devotion bring them to surrender immediately unto the Supreme Lord, and out of the causeless mercy of Krishna, they can understand Krishna. No one else can understand Him. So even great sages agree. What is Atma? What is the Supreme? It is He whom we have to worship. So Prabhupada would constantly quote this verse from the end, near the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tattvataha. That I can only be known by bhakti. Bhakti yavanyaschasmi tat, in truth. This word tattvata, which appears twice in this verse. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavanyaschasmi tattvata tato mam tattvato gyatva vishate tadanantadam. And knowing me in truth, by this process of bhakti, one can enter into the eternal spiritual world. In the 14th chapter of the 10th canto, Brahma's prayers after he was bewildered and he had stole the calves and everything, very important. He has, now, why was he bewildered? He became bewildered because he saw, little Krishna having his lunch there. He saw the slaying of Aghasura, but it didn't compute how this little boy, with a stick in his hand and a flute tucked under his sash, taking lunch with his friends, was the same. His Lord was Lord Brahma's creator, Mahavishnu, and everything. So he didn't want to hurt anybody. So he put them under the mystic power and so forth. The pastime. So after Krishna reveals that he really is God. So he has these wonderful prayers, and our commentators have written extensively. If you go to the Krishna book, you see that's a long chapter, not as long as chapter 87, but very, because there's a lot of commentary. So one of the verses there is that Tattenu kampam suchamikshimano. No. How's it go now? I guess it. Anyway, the meaning is that only one who has attained a little particle of mercy can understand you in truth. Forget the first word, but others may speculate for millions of lifetimes on the Vedas, and they cannot understand you. And the point is very simple: is that Krishna he reserves the right to be hidden. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavata. I am not revealed to everybody. Even when he was on the planet, only a few actually recognized that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so, if we want to know God, we have to approach him in the proper way, through his representative, through submission, by giving up our pride in our own knowledge and our own efforts, and simply surrendering to the process of submissive oral reception, ardent hearing. This is the key. Hearing from the right source. As we heard this morning, how Narada Muni, this whole allegory, we're just finishing up this allegory of Puranjan and to King Prachinabhari. It was all by way of Narada Muni imparting transcendental knowledge to King Prachinabhari, very fortunate soul. And of course it worked. And he gave up completely his involvement in the Karmakanda and trying to go to heaven and all this animal sacrifice, That's it. Thank you, Prabhu. Atapite deva padam bujudaya prasara lesha anuge janati tattvam. There's the word again. Janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya eko pichadam vichinvan. Thank you. First word. So the little prasada, lesha anugrita, means some little grace on your part. They can understand you because you're in the heart. You're revealing from within what the truth is, and it works for us also. And this is why Lord Chaitanya's movement is so important, and the chanting of the holy name, because we're so unqualified. There's no way in the world we're going to go to the Gurukul and practice all the austerities and gradually increase our knowledge. We have to get the heart cleared right away so that we're receptive to the message. Then when we read Prabhupada's books, we'll be interested, we'll be attracted to hear. Just by the chanting. Chant, dance, take prasadam. Well, that's a simple. I think I can do that. I can do that. And if you do that, then you get association of genuine devotees, and you become attracted to read that book that they sold you last week. That's what happened to me. And so, and then Krishna from within, he's also purifying. Shinbatam sakata Krishna punya shavana kirtana riddhandaksto yabadhrani vidunodi suritsatam. That when we hear submissively Sakata Krishna, Punya Shavani, hearing that sound about Krishna, which brings piety just by being heard, then Krishna from within the heart, Prabhupada actually uses this term. Krishna's there in the nominative. I heard a lecture, meaning that he's the subject of the sentence. He's doing the purifying. He's doing the cleansing from within the heart. And then that corresponds exactly to the verses that Rupa Goswami gives from faith to love. How you give this preliminary faith somehow brings you into the association of devotees, somehow or other. Sadhu sangha, and then by that sadhu sangha you're going to hear, and you maybe also want to chant now. This is what they're doing. So let me have some. You have any beads? Okay, yeah, we can let you, Bhakta John, take these beads. So you're chanting, and then if you're fortunate, you'll get serious to continue. and all the purification is going on, the anartha-nivritti is going on. And you get a very important aspect, taking initiation, because Maya is so strong, we're so infected for many, many lifetimes, that without that, strength imparted by association and the determination that can be gotten through initiation and all of the, these connection, it's very hard to stay on the path, So that initiation is very important. And then anartha-nivritti. And then you get to the point, as described right in that section, of nishta. What does it say? Naishtiki. What does it say? Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. Bhagavad Gita Mashoke bhakti bhavati naishtiki. That's the nishta platform. Where Prabhupada said 75%, not all, of the anarthas or the abhadras are destroyed. But you have real faith. And how is that faith defined? Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kohe Sudvidhar Nishjoy Krishna Bhakti Korle Sarva Karma Kritahoy. That real faith is defined this way, and we should try to achieve this. Vishwas Kohe, very firm determination. Sudvidha Nishjoy, very strong. That what? That just by the activities of bhakti, all of my desires will be fulfilled. I don't have to, I do my bhakti on Thursday evening. No, it's not like that. You have to do bhakti on Thursday evening, Wednesday evening, Tuesday, and every in between. So that's the strong faith. And all the while, your ruchi is increasing. It's not that you go to nishta and then after nishta you get some ruchi. You've already gotten some ruchi, but ruchi is, is increasing more. So that's the next step. The things that were austerities become pleasures. We heard this morning. Have you gotten this book by Giriraj Swami yet about Bombay? Have you seen it? It's now in the warehouse in the BBT. They've got. It's an amazing story, and Vijay is here. Is that why you're here? To talk to Vijay? To meet Vijay? He just happened to be coming down. He lives here now. Navina Nirada is like one of the main pioneers of book distribution in this movement. I don't know if you know that. Very, very legendary. Thank you for gracing our humble temple here. Have you been here before? I don't remember you coming down here.
Yeah, a couple of times.
Lavamacha. I may not have been here. I used to travel a lot before COVID. But Vijay was saying how that when he first was coming, he of course he sent out a book distribution, but he wanted to keep doing it because it's so hard. Because he knew that it was, it's an austerity. And to this day, he said, you still have to surrender because you're dealing with those people. But my God, when you read about the early days, we've all read a little bit about Bombay in the early days, But he's describing it in detail, how difficult it was. Jagat Purush, who I met when I went there, my name is in the book, twice. First time, it's not me, it's Pancha Dravida, who's known as Dravida. He was very active in the early days. But later on in 77, right after Prabhupada disappeared, I came, anyway, it's a long story. I arrived in Vrindavan on like the 16th of November, and then we went to Mayapur. And then one of my assignments, I was working with BTG, was to go to the Bombay temple, which had not yet opened, and interview the devotees and write an article about it, So I came there, and the article that I wrote, he quotes in the book. So there's two Dravidas, I also get it, but I didn't deserve it. But anyway, I think I also visited there in '75, the first year I was there, and I saw that shed, and I saw the place that they were. There was, but to read about it, the difficulties. Jagat Purush, he stayed there. He came to do a little cooking. He stayed for 10 years. But it describes how he's cooking there, and it's so hot. It's unbelievably hot, and 110, 120 degrees. So he had to stop and go outside and get cooled. So they said, but the deities are still there in the shed. So he went in and he started fanning the deities. And as he's fanning the deities, by some miracle, he became cooler. He became cooler, even though he's in the same shed. You read it. There's a lot of amazing things in there. But it's a fact that like the Prabhupada, the austerities I undertook are just legendary. That for 10,000 years they'll be legendary and inspiring. And as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, the difficulties I undertake in your service are the greatest pleasure. So that's the science, of devotion. But to come to that point, you have to be strong. All right, we have time. Let's see. We did Namev Dusuragana. So he's describing here how no one can know me, even the hosts of demigods. They cannot know me because I'm the source of these demigods and these great sages. And the bottom line is that unless one takes up the process of devotional service and follows in the footsteps of the great acharyas, Krishna will not reveal himself. But if you're fortunate and he does, and you can understand his pastimes in truth, then this is your last birth. Again, the word tattvataha, janma karma tame divyam evam yoveti tattvataha. In the third chapter, the fourth chapter, sorry. One who understands my birth and activities in truth, then when leaving this body, it comes to me, doesn't come back again. So that's what this movement is all about: is learning Krishna's, understanding Krishna in truth. All right, I'm going to save a little time for a few poems, if it's okay. I don't know if you've seen this one. This one I wrote a few years ago for Prabhupada's appearance day, and I kind of tweaked it a little bit so it's good for any day. Oh Prabhupada, we hail. It's also about book distribution, book production. Oh Prabhupada, we hail the day when you appear just like a ray of Krishna's vast effulgence bright to give this blind world back its sight. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts and pray with deepest love that we may serve your lotus feet in every circumstance we meet. As years go by and books go out, we see what life is all about. To serve your mission and our Lord's by spreading wide your sacred words. As well, you want us all to strive to let those words direct our lives. This safest path will lead us home, no more in Maya's realm to roam. And this one I haven't done yet here, but I didn't bring my little hurdy-gurdy. I have a little app, tambour app, and I'll have to do it a cappella tonight. So this is the first Kunja Biharashtaka. I don't know if we'll get through the whole thing, but okay. In the Savamala. I wrote this poem on a plane back from the New York Rath Yatra to L.A. So the Sanskrit, I'll give you a little taste of the Sanskrit. It has a very nice beat. It's the same beat as the Yugal Gita, chapter 35 of the 10th canto. Inna nila manimandulavarna pullani pukusamanchitakarna Krishna labha dakshora sihari sundaro jayati kunja bihari. His smooth complexion conquers sapphires, stunning to the eye. Kadamba blooms with fragrance full on each ear gently lie. His beauty is greatened by his chest, where Gunja necklace stays. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. Where's the drum? Come on. Radhika vadana chanda chakora savaballa babadhuda tichora chachari chatudan chadachari charuto jayati kunja bihari. Chakora longing for the moon of Radha's radiant face, a thief purloining patience from the coward's wives of pace. His expert rhythmic dancing winning all the gopis' praise. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. Sarvatak patila kaulakapava Dwangsana ritabasa vagarbha Koshta rakshana kategididhari lilaya. Jayati Kunja Bihari, Jayati Kunja Bihari. When Indra's sacrifice he stopped, he stole the Deva's pride. By playfully uplifting Giri Govardhan to hide his friends and cows beneath the hill for 7 nights and days. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Ragamandala Vibhushata Bhangshi, Vibramena Madano Sabashangsi, Tuyamana Charitak Shukashari, Shrinabi, Jayat Kunja Bihari. Heartwarming, warbling melodies adorn his flute which sings of Cupid's fest. To him unending happiness it brings. The parrot pair his loving pastimes never tire to praise. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. Hey Shatakumbha Chihada Kula, Keki Chanda Gavarada Chula, Navnayova Nala Sadvajanari Ranjano, Jayati Kunja Bihari. His silken garments steal a splendid glow by gold possessed. His crown of perfect peacock plumes defeats all other crests. Vrindavan's radiant girls rejoice to see his loving ways. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest played. Stasiki kuta sugandha patira, swana kanchi padishobikatira, radiko natabayo daravadi kundaro, Jayat Kunja Bihari. Most fragrant sandal paste anoints his limbs so slightly blue. A splendid golden belt adorns his waist, he is likened to an elephant bound by the ropes of Radha's winning ways. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest play. Goldadata tilako tilapala, Kedi chantalita champakamala, Adindikanda Ragahesha Besari Sumbhavam, Jayati Kunja Bihari. His fulgent forehead glows with golden tilak he's applied. His playful pastime swing his champak garland side to side. He meets the gorgeous gopis for their rendezvous in caves. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest play. Hey! Vimmocha the Kanchana Nritya, Chipta Gopalalaka the Kritcha, Prema Mata Vishabhana Kumari Nagaro, Jayati Kunja Bihari. Their work ignore the cowards' wives are nearly paralyzed. When dancing glances strike them from the corners of his eyes, ecstatic heroes setting love mad Radha's heart ablaze. All glories to the Lord who in Vrindavan's forest plays. Ashtakam Madhuda Kunja Bihari, Kridaya Patatiya Kilahari, Satpayati Bilda Satpadagagam, Satpayati Vatiragam. The pastimes that the Lord enjoys in broad sylvan bowers enhance this octave's beauty and pour forth pure nectar showers. Whoever hears these verses soon acquires saintly traits and serves his luscious lotus feet with love that ne'er abates. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Go Premanande, Hare Bo. Okay.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can you hear me?
Yeah, but we got to end right now.
Oh, yeah, I don't have a question. I just wanted to thank you very much for that.
Okay, Jessica. Haribo.
Haribol.
She just visited me.